Greetings and welcome to the channel. This is Mikhailov from Team Retro, where we like retro games and the devices that bring them to us. So it is now 2025, and at the end of last year, we got quite a few vertical handhelds in. One of them being the TrimUI Brick. So we're gonna say farewell to 2024 with one of the most pocketable of verticals to come out of last year. In this video, we're going to put this device through its paces, brainstorm the best use case, and find out if it's worth your hard-earned dollar bucks. So let's dive in and get to work. At time of recording, the TrimUI Brick can be pre-ordered from GoGameGeek for about $80. The unit I'm using is a black unit provided by GoGameGeek for the purposes of this review. As is always required, all opinions are my own, I'm not being paid, and they are not seeing this video before it is published. Now it's time to hop on our mount and ride into Spec Town. The TrimUI Brick is powered by an Allwinner A133. The GPU is an Imagination PowerVR GE8300. The device has 1 GB of LPDDR4X RAM and 8 GB of eMMC storage with expansion via a micro SD card slot. The screen is a 3.2-inch IPS screen with OCA lamination, a 1024 by 768 resolution, and a 4:3 aspect ratio. Giving the device life is a 3000 mAh battery. For connectivity, this handheld has Wi-Fi built in as well as Bluetooth. The device I received shipped with CrossMix OS. Getting into the quick unboxing, inside the box is a handheld, a user manual, a USB-C cable, and I also received these replacement shoulder buttons for either, I guess, changing the color or if I needed to replace one that had broken, and there's 2 sets in here. Now we're going to go ahead and tour the device, and if you're new to the channel, this is where I just go around the device and we just look at the hardware specifically. So we'll test buttons, we'll see where everything is, and we'll just kind of get a feel as to what you're getting hardware-wise. And if you haven't done so yet, please take a second to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you can see when I come out with future content. It really does help the channel grow and helps me to bring more content out to you. So we're gonna go ahead and we usually start at the top, and believe it or not, there's no I/O at the top here. There's a well-placed LED right here, and I actually like the placement of this LED because this is where a Game Boy cart would go if this were an original Game Boy. So it does kind of create the illusion that there's something there, and it is there to let you know if there's a low battery or some other notification you may need. Now let's actually go ahead and take a look at the back of the device. And here are the shoulder buttons. Now, these buttons have a very clicky sound to them. These are digital. These are not analog by any stretch of the imagination, nor do they need to be. And they're fairly well placed. Your fingers are more than likely going to rest on them as you're playing. And out of the way here is a USB-C cable. This is an OTG port, which means you can actually put in a small USB drive and it's gonna kind of be out of the way. So if you don't want to use the included micro SD card or you need to transfer files, you can actually do that using this top port, and it does kind of simulate putting a Game Boy cart into an original Game Boy. I actually kind of like that they placed that there. If we go to the side of the device, you have the volume rockers, and then on this side you have a function switch as well as your power button, and you have a minimal branding here that says TrimUI Brick, kind of out of the way, but then they also branded the back as well. If we take a look at the front of the device, we have an OCA laminated screen, 3.2 inches, very minimal bezels around the screen. And with this black model, those bezels just kind of blend into the device. And let's take a look at our D-pad here. Slightly clicky, slightly mushy, feels like a rubber membrane connection, and it has a pretty good feel to it. I've actually always been a fan of TrimUI's D-pad design. I liked it on the TrimUI Smart Pro as well. Let's do a quick sound test. It's barely clicky at all. It's actually nice and mushy. Kind of how we like our D-pads. We don't want it to be too clicky. You have two function buttons here. I, as of yet, have not found a way to map these to start and select, but they do have other functions that we're going to get into when we start testing the software. And you have start and select here, very oddly placed, because select is in the middle and start is on the right here, and the menu button is on the left. I would have much rather preferred this menu button be in the middle, but these are all one set of buttons. You could see if I wiggle one, the others wiggle with it. And now we have our face buttons. Very little travel, and there is a bit of a click to them. They're kind of loud from my perspective. If I were to hold them and just play, yeah, you'd hear it a little bit, but I don't think that those are clicky enough to disturb a neighbor or somebody in a waiting room or something like that. They're functional, they're fine. And one thing I like about this device is for a pocketable device, they actually decided to use front-facing speakers, which you see here. And usually you have them on the bottom, but I actually kind of applaud TrimUI for making front-facing speakers on a pocketable handheld. And here, finally, at the bottom of the device, you have your micro SD card slot, your USB-C cable for charging, and your 3.5mm headphone jack. You also have a reset button here if you need it, and this looks like it's a microphone hole. Let's take a look at the out-of-the-box software experience. This particular unit came with CrossMix OS, which is an enhanced version of the stock firmware that TrimUI units typically ship with. This SD card also came preloaded with ROMs, which I always consider shady, especially when this best of section uses copyrighted icons and logos and things like that. But if you don't have a collection or you just want to turn this thing on and play, this is an option for you. In CrossMix OS itself, you have the option to set these extra 3 function buttons. The switch on the side by default turns on and off performance mode, and the middle left button switches the D-pad to a joystick. This is very handy when emulating Dreamcast, N64, and PSP because this handheld does not have a joystick. I like that you don't have to do these changes manually in RetroArch, and you can just do it on the fly with the press of a button. This means that Dreamcast games like Mr. Driller and Ikaruga can play just fine with the D-pad, but when going into something like Crazy Taxi, you can switch to joystick mode. N64 is a bit of an odd time on this handheld. You have to switch the D-pad to joystick mode, but also when you need to access the C buttons, you have to hold R2 and press the corresponding face button. This isn't an ideal experience for N64, but you can see here that despite the quirky control scheme, I am making my way through Castlevania with a decent amount of success. You can play N64 if you want to, but it won't be an ideal control experience unless you're playing a lightweight game or something that doesn't require all of the buttons. If we take a look at performance, these higher-end systems will work, but you are going to get frame dips here and there. N64 and Dreamcast are decent, but you won't get perfect God of War on this handheld. It dips to about 25 frames per second and stutters at points. Another thing I need to point out is that when trying to push the system, the back gets uncomfortably hot. I noticed this right away and decided to get some readings. The back of the screen at its hottest point measured about 35 degrees Celsius or about 95 degrees Fahrenheit. This is pretty hot to the human hand. Not enough to burn, but enough to cause discomfort. And on a small device that already has ergonomic issues, this just makes me have to readjust my hand placement and interferes with my ability to fully enjoy the game. So what I did, instead of focusing on those higher end systems, was I loaded up MinUI using a guide from the great Retro Game Core, and I set this system up for lower end gaming like 8 and 16-bit systems, as well as some portable handhelds from my childhood. I'll leave a link in the description to Russ's written guide. Ultimately, Here's what my SD card setup looks like. I disabled all the systems I wasn't planning on using, numbered the systems I am using so they show up in a certain order, and changed the emulator for Super Game Boy games to MGBA just by changing the emulator title in the folder name. I was even able to change the boot logo to my channel logo. Now, I can focus on what this handheld is best for. For regular Game Boy titles, I stuck to the default core and changed the colorization to Special 1, and Super Game Boy Enhanced titles are in the Super Game Boy folder using the MGBA core, so I can play those games with the full colorization that the Super Game Boy brought to certain games. MinUI also has a couple other nice touches. The function switch on the side now operates as a toggle for silent mode, and the OS has a more simplified menu option for loading and saving states, as well as accessing core options. If I can help it, this is the OS that I use when I need to give a handheld as a gift. It's really easy to navigate and is meant to get out of the way so you can focus on gaming. Here, on the TrimUI Brick, it feels right at home. Now let's wrap things up with my final thoughts. I have reviewed a few devices that have advertised themselves as pocketable, and this is the first device I feel actually does the job well. It's not too small like the Anbernic RG28XX, but it's not hampered down by pants-catching joysticks like the MiUI A30 and the iNeo Pocket Micro, which to me are both devices that are more suited for a book bag than a pocket. I like a flexible device, and this handheld has support for both CrossMixOS and MinUI with newly in a testing phase. While most will be happy with CrossMixOS, it's nice to know there are options out there like MinUI for those who want them. This chip, for being in a pocketable handheld, is pretty capable. Just 3 years ago, we would never have thought of having N64 and Dreamcast on something this small, and it's nice to see the ceiling of what these small handhelds can do raise a little bit more every year. However, there are some negatives. The most important being the fact that this handheld gets pretty damn hot when pushed to its limits, to the point where it does get uncomfortable to hold. This doesn't happen when playing the lower end systems, but it makes me very hesitant to try anything over a 16-bit system on this handheld. And finally, the ergonomics are not the best out there. I think if you're playing a puzzle game or an RPG, you'll most likely be fine, but fighting games and platformers were more of a crampy struggle because of how small this handheld really is. Overall, I think if you do decide to purchase a TrimUI Brick, you'll be happy with your purchase as long as you temper your expectations and know exactly what you are buying and what you are buying it for. If you're interested in Dreamcast or PSP, there are some much better handhelds out there that can handle those systems. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Is this a device you are considering, and what do you think is the best use case for a device like this? And please feel free to continue the conversation on the Retro Handhelds and Steam Machine Discords, where you could find me hanging out in between videos. And if you want to support the channel like these wonderful people on the screen, you could do so by going to my Patreon page. Links for all those places are in the description. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and please be sure to like and subscribe if this video was helpful to you in any way. But until next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.